Imagine you're wandering through the desert and you stumble upon a hidden cave. Inside, you find a collection of ancient texts. Texts that could literally rewrite everything we thought we knew about a crucial moment in history. It's the kind of discovery that kicks off a 2,000-year-old mystery. And believe it or not, that's pretty much what happened back in 1947. Some local shepherds were exploring caves near the Dead Sea when they found these clay jars holding what we now call the Dead Sea Scrolls. And this wasn't just a few old pages. We're talking about a massive library of over 900 manuscripts, including the oldest copies of the Hebrew Bible ever found. For historians, this was like finding a lost chapter of the past. But, a discovery this big always comes with an even bigger question. These scrolls were hidden away for 2 millennia. So who wrote them? Who were these incredibly dedicated, mysterious scribes who created this entire library? And why on earth did they hide it from the world? To get to the bottom of this, our investigation has to start right where the scrolls were found. The story of this incredible desert discovery is the very first piece of our puzzle. Now, as we start looking for the authors, one group immediately jumps out as our prime suspect, a really fascinating and kind of enigmatic Jewish sect from that time period known as the Essenes. And look, the Essenes weren't some small, fringe group nobody had ever heard of. The famous first-century historian Flavius Josephus, he actually lists them right alongside the 2 most well-known Jewish groups of the era, the Pharisees and the Sadducees. So yeah, they were a major player. In fact, ancient writers like Josephus and another named Philo estimated there were around 4,000 of them. Now, that's a pretty significant community, definitely big enough and organized enough to produce such a huge library of texts. So let's place these folks in history. The Essenes probably got their start way back in the 2nd century BCE. They were basically dissenters who broke away from what they saw as a corrupt temple leadership in Jerusalem. They thrived for a couple of centuries, but then they just seemed to vanish from history, right around the time of the catastrophic First Jewish-Roman War in the 1st century CE. And their protest wasn't just about religious doctrine. It was about how they lived their day-to-day lives. They adopted a completely different, almost radical way of life. So what made them so unique? Well, for starters, they lived this super strict communal life, where they shared everything they owned. They practiced daily ritual baths for purity, which sounds a lot like baptism, right? Get this, they were against slavery, believing everyone was born equal. They refused to swear oaths, were totally devoted to charity, and most of them were celibate. Their whole lifestyle was so disciplined, it's often compared to the Christian monasteries that would pop up centuries later. Okay, so we've got our suspects, the Essenes, with their unique beliefs and habits. But what's the evidence that connects them to the crime scene? The caves where the scrolls were actually found. Well, the plot really thickens when we look at one specific place. This right here is Qumran. It's the ruins of an ancient settlement. And guess what? It's located right next to the caves. For decades, the leading theory has been that this was an Essene community headquarters, the very place where these scrolls were written and studied. And we even have a kind of geographical smoking gun from an ancient writer. The Roman historian Pliny the Elder wrote that the Essenes lived on the west side of the Dead Sea, which puts them in the exact same area as the Qumran ruins. But honestly, the most powerful evidence comes from inside the scrolls themselves. One of the most important texts, called the Community Rule, lays out all the regulations for this pious communal life. And when you read it, it is a near-perfect match for how historians like Josephus and Philo describe the Essenes. The motive, the means, the location, it all seems to be pointing right at them. So, case closed, right? The Essenes did it? Well, not so fast. Like any good mystery, this one's got a twist. And believe me, not all scholars are convinced. So this is where we get to the heart of the debate. The standard theory, the one we've been talking about, is that the Essenes at Qumran wrote the scrolls. But there's a competing theory that says Qumran wasn't a monastery at all. It was a military fort. And in that version of the story, the scrolls are just a collection from different libraries in Jerusalem, hidden in the desert to save them from the invading Roman army. So what's the evidence for these doubts? Well, for one, there's just the sheer variety of texts and handwriting styles. Some scholars, like Norman Golb, have argued that there's no way one small, isolated community could have produced all of it. Then you've got the huge cemetery at Qumran, which has graves of women and children. That seems to clash with Pliny's description of a celibate male community. Although, to be fair, Josephus did mention that one order of Essenes was allowed to marry, which just adds another fascinating layer to the whole debate. But here's the thing. Whether they wrote all the scrolls or just some of them, the ideas found inside those texts didn't just vanish into the desert sand. Their influence actually seems to echo throughout history. I mean, think about someone like John the Baptist. His mission, his simple life out in the desert, his focus on ritual water immersion for repentance, all of it sounds incredibly similar to Essene practices. A lot of scholars think it's very likely he was either an Essene himself or at the very least was heavily influenced by their ideas. And the parallels with early Christianity, they are just impossible to ignore. A sacred meal with bread and wine, ritual immersion in water, a big cosmic struggle between forces of light and darkness, the idea of celibacy and forbidding divorce. All of these are foundational ideas in early Christianity, and they were all right there in Essene beliefs. And maybe the most jaw-dropping connection is this. One of the Dead Sea Scrolls describes a figure who will be called Son of God, and they will call him Son of the Most High. That language is astonishingly similar to what the angel Gabriel says about Jesus in the Gospel of Luke. It suggests that the ideas and even the specific language of the Essenes were part of the very air that early Christianity was born into. So while we might never know for sure who wrote every single one of those scrolls, the story of the Essenes is this powerful reminder. It shows us that history is just filled with these forgotten groups and radical ideas that, long after they're gone, can leave a permanent mark on the world. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other hidden histories are quietly shaping our lives right now?